Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, Williamson changes testimony. Also, the V team takes a look at Bentley troubles. And Prosecutor Matt Hart is leading the Untouchables.
Yeah, can't touch this. Look, man, can't touch this. You better get a hype, boy, because you know you can't touch this. Ring the bell, school's back in. Can't touch this.
Hammer time?
Can't touch this.
All this and much, much more coming up next on The V.
The Voice of Alabama Politics, with your host, Bill Brett. Now, the #1 political show in Alabama, The V.
Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by the V team. Welcome all.
Good morning.
How you doing?
It has been one of the more taxing weeks of my life, and that's probably true for a lot of people. On day one of the felony trial of Speaker Mike Hubbard, the defense and the prosecution gave opening statements in what is guaranteed, at least at this point, to be the trial of the decade. Matt Hart gave the jurors a classroom education in state government, ethics laws, and how Mike Hubbard had broken 23 of the laws he had voted to pass, and he still ignored them. Susan, you were there. It was a compelling day.
It was very compelling. The jury kind of seemed a little, he started with the 3 branches of government and went down, which a lot of people in our world were concerned that the jury wouldn't understand our world. But he did a very, very good job of making it very clear, what the job of the legislators are, what the jobs of the lobbyists are, what the ethics laws are, and where the fine lines are in that. So, I felt very confident after he gave it. It's like 50 minutes before he ever started on the charges about to Mike Hubbard. Of what he actually explained to them.
Beth, I talked to several defense attorneys who don't happen to like Matt Hart. Imagine that.
Right, I've talked to a few myself.
And they said that they thought Hart's opening was very, very good, that he broke it down very well.
Right, because you've got to have that foundation for people to understand. If you just start going in on all 23 of these charges, and to be fair to the speaker on this one, he didn't break 23 different laws. He broke about half a dozen laws, half a dozen times each. But you've got to make sure that people know what's going on. So when you start throwing around this jargon, they have an understanding. And from what I heard from people who were there was that, Bill Baxley kind of scoffed at Matt Hart's opening statements, like that he wasted the jury's time by telling them all that. And if there's one thing that anybody doesn't like, it's to be made to feel stupid. And so, a lot of people don't understand all of this stuff in the nitty-gritty of government. Nobody wants to be made to feel like you should have known all this. How dare he waste your time?
Well, and Susan thought that Bill Baxley talked down to the jury. Jack, you're the only one here who's been cross-examined or...
No, he's a puppy dog, No, I think that, Bill Baxley was Attorney General, and he's kind of known for his theatrics, so you can expect a little bit of that. But I just don't think they have a good case.
Yeah, I don't either. And one of the things that we noticed about the opening statement is this was a very, very different Matt Hart. I think he's kind of the Matt Hart you've told me about, the guy that's really nice and caring and all that.
Yeah, he's had a long career where he's been bombastic. And, when you're investigating people and you, in your heart of hearts, pardon the pun, you really believe that person is guilty, and then people pull shenanigans, it's very frustrating. But he does have a nice demeanor about him.
Yes, he did.
Well, we saw a very different Matt Hart than we normally saw. And Beth, I thought that threw Baxley off his game because I thought, we were going to see the bombastic Matt Hart, and we didn't.
Right, I think so too. I think Baxley was expecting to kind of come in and lighten the mood and pull out his little napkin with his opening statements on it and kind of be a good comparison or a good contrast to the Matt Hart that everybody's kind of seen. But I think that Baxley, I don't think the jury's going to fall for the stuff that he's pulling.
We heard also from John Ross, the former executive director of the ALGOP, who was the executive director under Hubbard, and he talked about how they had funneled money from the ALGOP to majority strategies and then back to Hubbard's Craftmaster Printing, right?
Was it sent back as a kickback?
You know,
A
that's
certain
It's,
percent?
that's kind of foggy right now,
Yeah.
but what we do know and what John Ross confirmed is that Mike Hubbard chose Craftmaster ultimately to be where the money ended up, and the checks were cut from the ALGOP to Majority Strategies, who's in Florida, who subcontracted back to Craftmasters to actually do the
It's
printing.
help
a
Mike.
typical pass-through, though, so it doesn't show up on their reports that they're
Right.
giving money to Craftmasters. You have to kind of chase the money around to
Well,
figure it out.
and Jack, to that your point, Tim Howell, another operative that works with John Ross, he admitted that they took ALGOP money, sent it to his company. He skimmed 5% off the top and then sent it to Mike. And when he was asked, what did he do for the money? He went, nothing. I mean,
Well, he was an administrator.
Well, and two, Chris Hines, cemented that deal when he testified the next day, in that they were the ones that actually did the work.
right.
And he and Tim Howe both said he didn't do the work.
Right.
They gave him 5%. He passed the money right along. In fact, Chris Hines didn't know why it was done that way. He was just told to invoice
Right.
Howell Group.
Right. Day two was really where the fireworks were. Former Chief of Staff to Mike Hubbard, Josh Blades. No pun intended, he cut Mike 1,000 times. And this is a guy who said Mike Hubbard was his best boss ever. Susan, what were some of the accusations that Josh made?
The most damning accusation that Josh Blade made, and he made a lot of them that day. He was very uncomfortable doing it, but he did a good job. The most damning one was when he was finally asked the speaker why it was so important for him to get this patent for his client, CV Holdings. He said, the speaker responded, I have 100,000 reasons.
And then, Beth, they asked him, did he take that to mean money? And he said,
He said, of course he did. And,
Yeah.
and don't forget, Josh is paid by the state of Alabama. And any time that he spent working on helping get this patent for the speaker's client was spent with taxpayer resources and money in a taxpayer-funded office for a private client of Mike Hubbard. Like, that's really important to keep in perspective here.
Josh said on the stand that he had no idea that Mike was being paid $10,000 a month, and here he was working on this guy's project for him.
It's. I don't think John Ross and Tim Howe knew it either, did they?
No, they didn't know.
Now, they were paid guns by APCI, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And they're also registered lobbyists.
Right.
Yeah.
But they had no idea Mike was consulting for $10,000 a month.
No, they had no idea. We got about 1 minute, so we're going to probably push day two over a little bit. But I do want to get to the fact that, Susan, Mike Hubbard took his state car, his state security guy, and Josh Blades, and drove to Atlanta supposedly on a business trip for the state, and stopped off at Chick-fil-A and tried to sell cups for his customer, didn't he?
He did. And then we're talking about Josh Blades at that time was the highest paid legislative employee in the state. So here we have a company car. It just so happens that Chick-fil-A is on the way.
State car.
I'm sorry, state car. Well, he has a company car too, we found out. The state car with these guys sitting there waiting for him while we're paying them to sit for however long he had to have this meeting to sell cups for Bob Abrams.
At $10,000 a month.
At
You gotta sell a lot of
$10,000 a
cups for
month
that,
on his
Jack.
way, to a state-paid business trip for the state.
All right, we're going to pick this up right after the break. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back.
Can't touch this. Look, man, can't touch this. You better get hype, boy, because you know you can't touch this. Ring the bell, school's back in. Can't touch this.
In 1977, an 8-year-old boy picked up the game of golf from his father. The odds of that same boy then making it to the US and European pro golf tours, 1 in 7 million. The odds of the Big Easy winning the US Open twice, 1 in 1.2 billion. The odds of him having a child diagnosed with autism, 1 in 88. Ernie Els encourages you to learn the signs of autism.
Welcome back to the V, the voice of Alabama politics. Susan, I wanted to go back to Josh Blades. One of the things that was most compelling was when Josh Blades talked about Hubbard's client, American Pharmacy Cooperative, Inc. This is a client who wanted a job for the state. What they wanted was a monopoly over the Medicaid pharmacy benefit plan. They wanted to control all the drugs. They wanted to handle all that business. And Mike Hubbard and Greg Wren placed language into the general fund Medicaid budget to give them a monopoly. Josh Blades said he had no idea the speaker had a contract with them. What did he do on the night that he found out that Hubbard had a contract?
He was very upset. He didn't know about APCI until right before the vote. In fact, he was standing in the dais and asking Mike Hubbard not to vote or to vote to abstain, even while he was pushing the button. He was so upset finding out that his boss, Mike Hubbard, had this contract with APCI, and this language was in the bill, that he went to Philip Bryan's house that night because he felt like he had participated in something that was not right. He had participated in something that could possibly get the speaker into legal troubles.
Well, and Beth, we just back up a little bit. He was right before it was on the floor being debated, and Farrell Patrick, who was the lobbyist for APCI, told John Ross, who was also the lobbyist for APCI, who Jack mentioned, that Hubbard had a contract. And John Ross flew into a panic.
They went into panic mode, and they had to try to figure out, okay, how do we fix this? How do we stop? Because one of them, I think, said on the stand, this is ethics problems for all of us if this is the case. And they went into panic mode trying to get this stopped. And I mean, that, I think, to me, was the most egregious, since Claire's not here, I'll use it, egregious example of the speaker's just hubris is that Josh Blades is standing here saying, Mr. Speaker, please don't. And he reaches down and pushes the button.
And Jack,
who does that?
That kind of hubris is what we've seen from Hubbard all along. But, to know that his top guy is telling him, don't do it, sir, you could be in serious legal trouble. I mean,
I think Mike knowingly and willingly broke the law to put money in his pocket. And he didn't want John to know, or Tim Howe, or Josh.
No.
Because he knew what they would tell him, which is, don't do it, Mike. And he did it anyway. And my hat's off to Blades and John Ross and Tim Howe. They were very loyal to Mike when he was party chair, and after he became speaker, they worked for him.
I think they felt
betrayed. It took a lot, I know.
I think they felt betrayed.
Josh Blades gave the most compelling testimony of anyone we've seen so far. He was a stand-up guy. One of the really troubling things about day 3, and this was from a man who I once had high respect for. They were questioning Don Williamson, the man who used to run the Alabama Department of Health for 20 plus years, has a legendary career. They were asking him about what happened in a meeting that he had with Speaker Mike Hubbard after the bill passed, because, see, the governor and Medicaid Association had real problems with giving this contract to APCI. They didn't want to do that. But when they met with Hubbard, Williamson said some things that contradicted things he had told the prosecution before, and things that he had told me personally. Susan, you were there. It was a sight to see.
It was a sight to see. And by the graphic that Jonathan has up right now, anybody who knows Dr. Williamson knows this is not his normal demeanor. No, you can see there's something wrong here, and he's very upset about what he's testifying. Apparently, from what I can glean, he added to whatever testimony or meetings he'd had with Matt Hart before, and to try to say that this was all Greg Wren's idea, that the speaker told them in this meeting, which happened the day after the vote, that
he was going to get it killed.
That he was going
to get it killed, and he was going to help Stephanie Azar.
And that the APCI was a client of his, but only for out of state. But right behind that was Stephanie Azar, who totally contradicted all of that.
She did, Beth. I mean, Stephanie Azar, who is the commissioner over Medicaid, she contradicted her once boss.
Right, she did. And I mean, to the point that even after it was all said and done, people were asking them, like, are y'all sure y'all were in the same meeting? Are y'all speaking from the same day at the same time? And, you know, I think one thing that got pointed out there about this contract that might put it in perspective for the jury too, is that, you know, not everybody in Alabama has access to get their prescriptions at a Walmart or a CVS. You know, these are not places that are accessible for everybody else. And so I think that Matt Hart's done a great job of tying back not only why these are ethics violations, but why these violations have impacted the people that he's supposed to be representing. And I think that's what's going to hit with the jury.
It is. And Jack, I just wanted to ask you, I mean, Matt Hart asked Don Williamson, had he been threatened? Was he afraid now that because he was a lobbyist, he wasn't going to get, you know, his legislation passed he needed for his employer? I mean, you've known Don Williamson for a while. I mean, what was
A lot
going
of people change, Bill, because they get money. People
We've
are
seen
paid
it.
off and they flip. Now, I'm not saying he did, but I might think he might have. And he's left the health department, and he's going to immediately be a lobbyist for the Alabama Hospital Association. I smell something stinky.
You know, Medicaid is still on the table here. It's not funded. We're still talking about RCOs. We're still talking about a special session to deal with Medicaid. He was a man under pressure, Bill. Yesterday, you could see it. It was all over him.
Well, when here's two interesting things that did not happen in the jury room. Rob Riley, former Governor Bob Riley's son, and an attorney of record for Mike Hubbard during this trial, was sitting in the audience in the courtroom every day except Thursday. He had one of his minions with him, a guy named Jeremiah Mosley, not Amos Mosley, but Jeremiah Mosley. And so after Williamson's testimony and after Azar's testimony, I walked up to him and introduced myself, and he looked at me and said, "How'd you like that?" Meaning Williamson's testimony. Right. And I said, I found it very interesting. I also confronted Williamson and Azar as they were getting on the elevator, and I said, were y'all at the same meeting? Stephanie Azar said, yes. I said, well, you've contradicted each other. Their attorney stepped in front of them and said their testimony was similar. I said, it wasn't similar. It was not similar at all. You were there, Susan. It was a hot exchange.
It was a very hot exchange, so much so that when I pushed the elevator, but we thought their elevator had already gone down. I pushed the elevator button again, and it opened up, and they were still there. So we just decided we were going to go ahead and get on the elevator. As we approached the elevator, Williamson decided he was going to take the stairs. We never saw him again.
He said, "I'll just take the stairs." I mean, Beth. I mean, the drama. We're still having to fight Mike Hubbard, and he's on trial.
Right. This is too much, and it's getting. I mean, I didn't realize how stressed out this trial would make me until it's here, and y'all have been sitting there listening to it every day.
Well,
I need to point out.
We're going to have to hold it there. We'll come back to this subject when we get back. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with more news and analysis of the Mike Hubbard criminal trial.
Tell me lies, tell me sweet little lies. Tell me lies, tell me lies. Oh no, no, you can't disguise.
The Purple Heart. While many of the recipients are the wounded warriors living among us, today we honor the servicemen and women who received the Purple Heart for giving up their lives while defending our country. This award reflects the highest form of sacrifice, one's self. These service members sacrificed so that we can live free. Our country, our families, each one of us, we are all honored by their sacrifice. And today, we honor them by remembering them.
Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. Susan, you wanted to make another point about some of the testimony.
I want to make it very clear about the impressions that were left yesterday, or especially, out of the testimony of Dr. Williamson versus Stephanie Azar, the commissioner of Medicaid. Williamson left the jury with the impression that when they left that meeting, that it was Mike Hubbard's mission to get those words out, and that Greg Wren was not going to be on that conference committee to get those words out. Stephanie Azar, in opposition to that, said she was left with the impression to go to Greg Wren the next day and y'all just work it out and handle it. Those are very, very different impressions.
Well, and Beth, one of the things that we've heard from several witnesses is that Hubbard wanted to take the language out because he was trying to put the genie back in the bottle. It's like robbing the bank, and he figured out he was going to get caught. He wanted to give the money back.
Right. And I think that it was a little too late at that point. Everybody kind of figured it out. And I think that for some reason, there were other people involved in this, and I don't really know who that was yet, but this genie wasn't going back in the bottle. There were people that weren't going to let the genie go back in the bottle, because I think that on the flip side, once he realized what was going on, a lot of other people did too, and maybe they were okay letting him go down like this.
Well, and maybe so, Jack, but you mentioned something during the break that the Riley's fingerprint are all over this.
All over this. Mm-hmm. I mean, this last-minute flip by Don Williamson. I mean, come on. This is a guy that has lived a life of what we all believed was integrity. Mm-hmm. There's something rotten in Denmark about what happened.
Bill and I were talking before he took the stand yesterday. We were sitting there and going, well, this is one witness we know won't lie. He'll tell the truth. And dang, if he just didn't sit there and lie.
I bet Matt Hart wished he'd had Depends.
Matt Hart was furious. He was so upset, and he was trying to figure out a question he could ask him that he would honestly answer. And he said, were you threatened? Were you this? Were you that? And it really got heated.
He asked if he was threatened in his job. He asked if he was threatened in personal. And now understand, there was a rumor going around yesterday that most of these witnesses are being followed. Yeah,
well, I don't know about all that, but I did talk with people who have actual knowledge of the events that took place, and they said that they knew 24 hours before Williamson took the stand that he was going to walk back his testimony. I have to agree with Jack. I don't know what happened, but somebody got him in a big way.
Right now, though, keep in mind, too, we're at a time where the governor's potentially using his medical license to look up people's medical history. They're asking Aaliyah to look up people's criminal backgrounds. This is terrifying. That, when you start thinking what could have changed his mind, what could they have on him in his personal life that now they're using, or his family's personal lives, that is not information that's publicly available, but they're using here. It's scary.
Jack, he and Farrell Patrick have go back decades, and Farrell is right in the middle of this. I don't doubt that Farrell Patrick made some kind of deal
Farrell
with Hart.
Patrick is a friend, but he damn sure walks a tightrope on.
And Farrell Patrick was the lobbyist for APCI.
Yes.
Yeah, and we don't know if Farrell's done anything illegal.
He was like the in-house lobbyist, wasn't he? And then they hired John Ross and Tim, to. And
he let nobody know whose fingers were in that pie. It's just a crazy, crazy thing. And, they've had more people from APCI on, the CEO, Billy Ely. And they've also had people come in to testify on the gas district situation.
We've had back Brett Burek in there.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I learned from this that really threw me off, and I think that our viewers will find interesting, is, Baxley's trying to frame this as Hubbard didn't put the money directly in his pocket.
That's correct.
He just used it to pay off debt and bankruptcy. And one of those things was payroll taxes that didn't get paid. So this is money that he has withheld from his employees' checks to pay taxes on their behalf. And then that money never actually made it to the government, and now he owes that money back.
That hit home with a lot of the jurors.
It hit home. The jury actually physically reacted to that. You could tell what were the business owners on there, because they got that concept real quick. And most people that are in business, if they see someone else not paying their payroll taxes, they consider that stealing, which it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
Jack, it was $300,000 in payroll tax that he hadn't paid, and all of a sudden, and he raised that money. That's money in his pocket.
Sure. He drives
he has an interest in the outcome.
He lives in a nice house. He drives a Range Rover or something.
I also got him out of a felony conviction on not paying his payroll taxes.
Yeah, these are not people that live a cheap lifestyle, and that money helped pay it. He was getting around $60,000 from the state. He was getting $130,000 from his job. His wife was paid almost $200,000 a year, and he
he's
he
complaining
couldn't
about
meet
being
his
broke.
bills, Jack.
Or didn't pay his bills.
Didn't pay his bills.
You know,
I'd take any one of those jobs and be just fine.
Plus the money he was getting as consultant.
Right.
Well, that was hundreds
Millions.
of thousands of dollars. I mean, this man was living like a king, all because he was speaker. And you know, one of the problems we're having with the testimony of the jury and all this is that he is still the speaker of the Alabama House of Representatives, and people are afraid of him.
Right.
And,
They're
and
still
if they'd
afraid.
gotten rid of him, as every one of us has said and Claire has said, we wouldn't be in this trouble at the time.
And you know, Bill, that is one thing that you really can't get across to this jury.
Right.
The thing that we all know, those of us that are inside baseball, inside this bubble, it's very difficult to make this jury understand that these people, even the ones on the stand, are in fear for their lives, for their families. It's very difficult to, as a prosecutor, get that across.
Well, we got about less than a minute and a half. I got to get to our erstwhile governor, the love gov himself, Jack, the man, the mission, the Mason.
Oh, is he part of the Masons?
Yeah, as they say.
A free and accepted Mason?
She
She
heard
seemed to
that
have
she
accepted
said
it.
to tell Bentley to put them, never mind. Go ahead, Jack.
Just
I
listen
talked
to
to
that.
somebody the other day that's been questioned by the FBI. And this person told me it's serious, it's deep, and it's aggressive.
Wow.
And I think he's in for a real world of hurt.
I woke up the other morning to the pop-up on my phone saying grand jury has started in the Bentley case. And I was like, well, this is going to be a good day. We got Hubbard going to trial, and Bentley's got a grand jury.
Well, and the new prosecutor, the U.S. prosecutor, George Beck, the U.S. attorney, has recused himself. They brought in a new U.S. prosecutor out of Atlanta. He's over the Middle District of Georgia. This guy, John Horn, is the guy that prosecuted Eric Rudolph, the bomber.
Right.
He also prosecuted mafia kingpins. I mean, if he gets Bentley, that's like a trifecta: a bomber, a mafioso, and the love gov. I mean, come on. Who doesn't want that on your resume, right, Beth?
Right. I'm curious to see how this Bentley investigation turns out, because all of these things come right back to Mike Hubbard.
Yep.
And so I'm curious to see, with the testimony unfolding in Lee County the way it is, and this grand jury going on with Bentley, it's going to make it very difficult for us to keep all of the, or not us, because I'm not involved in it, but for the people who are involved to keep everything balanced.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. You've been watching The V. You can catch daily updates from Lee County by going to our website, liking us on Facebook, and going to YouTube. We're The V. You watch us because we watch them.